Excellent. Thanks, Ron, for the great context. And hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I am Nikhil Gedar, and I lead product marketing for cloud security solutions here at VMware. Um, Today, I want to talk about five key techniques that are really helping our customers step up their cloud security game. In my role, I get to talk to a number of different customers, just listening to the security challenges, but also sharing those best practices. So, I want to use some of those conversations to illustrate with some solutions that we have how our customers are improving their security posture. And in terms of context setting, I'm not going to boil the ocean. I think it's really been set up. Jorge mentioned, Aaron mentioned, right? It's well established that misconfigurations are really the number one security challenge for cloud teams out there, right? In the last few years, we have seen so many security breaches where some of the most forward-looking early adopters, advanced teams in security, have suffered from these breaches due to simple mistakes. And it ultimately boiled down to three issues in cloud. One, as Aaron mentioned, there's just the challenge of understanding the shared responsibility model. There's so much ambiguity that most customers find it difficult to find skilled professionals who have real operational expertise in managing complex environments. And in most organizations, we see that you have a small security team supporting hundreds of developers who themselves are not professionally trained in cybersecurity, especially in cloud, right? So it's a problem of scale. How do you scale across so many different teams, and how do you distribute responsibilities across these teams? But beyond the organization challenge, it's also a technical challenge. As Aaron mentioned earlier, right? The way you secure services in cloud are different from the way we are used to securing our perimeter in the data center, right? We're making the same kind of mistakes, but it requires a different kind of an approach. How do you actually protect something that only runs for a few milliseconds? How do you protect the Lambda server? So customers really have to think about how can we make our workloads more immutable? How can we integrate security checks into our DevOps pipeline so that they're secure from the beginning? So that's some of the key context. And this is where role for VMware and CloudHealth Secure State, which is a new offering that we had announced last year, comes in. So we essentially help customers solve some of their misconfiguration challenges in the cloud. And we have built this advanced maturity framework where we work with customers to essentially help them become more mature and advance their security journey. And often our customer conversations start with step one, which is just around visibility. Most teams want to figure out what the developers are doing in cloud, what mistakes are they making. They want to find out what kind of governance controls and security practices that the team should be following. We just saw some good examples, things like CIS, NIST, HIPAA, compliance frameworks, and security requirements. Teams need an easy way to ensure that these security controls are being followed. But at the same time, there are many customers who are a bit more advanced, who are looking for easy ways to scale security. That way, they can automatically fix these issues. And ultimately, the nirvana for every customer is to being able to shift left, right? Integrate these security checks directly into the pipeline so that you can make sure that everything that you're building is kind of secure from the beginning. So when we have these conversations with customers, surprisingly, the first step is not a technical conversation. Our conversations usually start with just simply understanding who within the customer organization is responsible for cloud security. And it does sound like a simple question. You might be surprised how often there's confusion around this. In many organizations, as you can see on the chart on the left, sometimes it's the developers, sometimes it's the operations teams, sometimes it's the information security department that's responsible for security. And even within information security, there's not much clarity around what are the roles some of the traditional teams should play. How is the role of vulnerability management different from GRC? Because, as you say, right, some of these security and compliance controls overlap. Or how do you enable SOC teams who are trying to monitor threats and threats that are correlated with misconfiguration in the cloud? So very, very critical for an organization to have clarity around how different teams, what kind of a role do they play in cloud security. And usually the answer is it's not a single team. It requires a combination of these teams because cloud security is actually a team sport. And beyond the clarity of responsibility, it's also important to think about how organizations are building that security culture and giving these teams a forum to engage. That's really critical. And in a lot of our customers that we work with, we notice this concept of cloud center of excellence. which essentially goes beyond security, where organizations are building these governance bodies where they're bringing in experts from cloud engineering, from security teams, from finance, as well as operations. That way, all of these teams can interact, raise their concerns, raise their requirements, and sort of build cloud operations and security in a more coordinated manner. So, as I mentioned, right, very critical step. Our conversations never start without having a clarity on who is responsible for security in the cloud. But once that's established, this is where our CloudHealth Secure State solution comes in. It's a public cloud security and compliance management service. And what that means is essentially we help customers detect some of the misconfiguration risk in clouds. It's a SaaS service that supports AWS and Azure today, and we're announcing support for Google Cloud shortly. Uh, Very easy to set up. It just takes a few minutes to set up read-only roles into cloud. The service takes all of your cloud inventory, models all your resources into a central data lake. Things like your resource configurations, relationships, your change activity logs, as Jorge mentioned from Google Cloud Logging API, also your native thread feeds, correlating all of this information in one place and then applying a set of best practices on top so that you can know what are the violations to your security best practices, violations to your compliance frameworks, but also violations to your custom policy. So essentially helping customers correlate risk due to these misconfigurations and threats. So that's just some background context of why I'm having this conversation. But this is the crux of my talk, right? I want to share some of the key things that are really helping our customers go above and beyond. As Ron mentioned earlier, right? All of the cloud providers provide basic capabilities for you to get security visibility in the cloud. And in fact, we also leverage a lot of these cloud native services. But there are some areas where we go above and beyond just giving you multi-cloud visibility. So hopefully these will be helpful to you. So first piece that's really surprising for a lot of our customers is just the realization that how important it's to have faster detection in cloud. So when most customers get started with security in the cloud, they simply start by scanning their cloud environments. And one issue with scanning is that your visibility in cloud is only limited to when you ran your last scan, right? Maybe that was 12 hours back, or maybe that was 2 days back. But we have seen so many honeypot experiments in cloud where we've seen hackers use automated scanning techniques to exploit your open SSH ports or misconfigured databases within seconds and minutes, right? And if somebody can break into your environment, cause you hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage within a few minutes, right? You can't afford to wait for days to find out that something wrong has happened, right? So this is where Secure State sort of goes to the next level in giving customers near real-time visibility, not only for threat detection, but also for misconfigurations. And the way we do that is essentially we leverage all of the cloud native services like your AWS CloudTrail logs, Azure Activity Logs, and Google Cloud Logging API. So we take all of these event streams, and whenever something changes in your cloud environment, we notice those events. And once we have those events, we are intelligently able to look up the delta in the cloud environment and tell you if somebody made a violation, if somebody introduced a new risk. So on an average, we can report out new misconfigurations and security incidents within 20 seconds, which is very, very unique and critical for security teams. Speed of detection is something very, very helpful that a lot of our customers find. The second area that's very helpful for security teams is just having the context. And the reason I stress on this is because both security and operations teams are essentially outside bodies when it comes to cloud, right? It's the developers that are owning the resources. It's the developers that are deploying resources in the cloud. So for a security organization sitting outside and looking at 10,000 misconfigurations and just figuring out what to do, it's an enormous challenge. The example you see here is a simple violation of an SSH ports that are open to any source address, right? You could have like 50 of those violations, and which one do you prioritize first, right? Which one should you ignore for the timing? So just having that context can be helpful. For example, on the right, you see some examples where you've got the same kind of SSH violation. On the right side, a zombie security group with nothing attached to it, so you know that okay, it's not an immediate risk. Maybe you can wait a bit, but at the same time, on the left-hand side, you have another similar violation, but with the security group that had an EC2 instance attached to it, right? So just looking at the context allows you to prioritize your violations quickly. Let me give you a more complicated example here. So another misconfiguration, and what's happening here is essentially you have an EC2 instance which has an SSH key pair attached to it, but also an administrative IAM role, right? And this is nothing unusual. This is a standard setup that you'll find in a lot of environments. But what happens is, let's say in a couple of days, somebody comes in, picks up the same SSH key and connects it to a few more instances that are also connected to an internet gateway. Now, suddenly you have accidentally elevated the risk profile of your environment because now somebody can use a brute force technique to get in and gain access to this key and ultimately gain admin access to your account. Now, pause for a second. Imagine you are the security guy who's never deployed these resources. If you don't have this context, it's very difficult to understand this kind of a lateral violation. And forget about yourself, right? Just explaining it to your developer that this is a critical mistake that they're making that they need to fix can be very, very challenging. So just having this context is something that is very helpful for secure state users. We give them these graphs that they can visualize for every single violation, analyze the context and look at the risk. That way they can bring all of the security operations and developer teams on the same page as far as analyzing misconfiguration goes. The third area, as I mentioned, is if you noticed my talk track, right? Security is a team sport, which means that whether it's a security team or the operations team that owns this area of configuration security in the cloud, they lean heavily on the developers to ensure engagement and to fix these issues. But one of the things with developers is that they probably do not want to go into your security tool. They may not want to go into a report, log into your GUI and do something, right? They want easy API access. Maybe they want to integrate something in their DevOps pipeline. Perhaps they're building an S3 bucket and they want to build a guardrail that, okay, every time this S3 bucket is open to the internet, I want you to fail the belt, right, and notify the developer. Those kind of things require that you give easy visibility, easy access to security insights to different teams, and that requires easy API access. So Secure State is a API first methodology platform where we give different teams easy access to different kind of insights, not just detection, but also our rules. For example, if a governance, risk, and compliance team simply wants to audit what policies are running in the cloud, what policies has security enforced in the cloud through their RSA Archer platform, they can do that because they have easy API access. So very important for security teams to think about not just their organization, but also think what are the different teams in their organization and how are they going to consume these insights. So once visibility has been set up for different teams, naturally the next step that comes in, okay, how do I fix these issues? And as I mentioned earlier, the nirvana for most security organizations is to be able to shift left, integrate everything into the DevOps pipeline. But the reality today is that most security organizations are lagging far behind in terms of their cloud maturity. We see that 92% of the organizations are far behind and the businesses are marching ahead, creating more and more issues. Today's security teams on day two have to deal with hundreds of accounts that have existed for years and resolve these 10,000 violations. So that naturally requires an automated approach, which a lot of different solutions offer. But one key objection that security teams face on day one is that their developers often do not trust the security teams to have right access to their environments. And that's not unfair because who's going to be responsible if security makes a mistake, right? Or if there's an unfortunate incident in which the security monitoring solution itself is breached, right? In those cases, hackers will also have access to your cloud environment because you simply wanted to allow your solution to make automated changes. So that's a major violation of zero trust security. So Secure State faced this objection as well, and we have found a creative way to help customers address this solution. So essentially what we do is we isolate our remediation engine from the SaaS monitoring service. So our Secure State users can essentially automate changes in their environment while simply maintaining read-only permissions with the SaaS monitoring service. At the same time, in order to automate changes, we give customers what we call as worker images. These are essentially container Docker images that they can deploy, control the full life cycle of these images, give these workers the right access to the actions they want to automate, and trigger them through the Secure State service. So just having this isolation makes the life of security teams a lot more easier because now they can have a more friendly conversation with developers and get them to trust them. So I would again insist, right? Auto remediation is very critical because of day two requirements, not just because of your DevOps need. But during auto remediation, operationalization will result in a lot of objections around getting context, objections around security access. So think about how you can get more creative ways to handle these questions from your developers. And the last piece I want to mention is in our experience with customers on a day to day basis, even though misconfigurations are the biggest headache, that 50 to 60% of the day goes into asking random questions. Uh, it's not often that they're just looking at a report and figuring out, okay, what's a violation of a security policy that's already defined in the platform. Sometimes they have to ask these random questions which are related to visibility and sometimes even non security questions. To give you an example, 3 months back, what happened is SaltStack, which is the popular configuration management service, they reported a vulnerability in which hackers could essentially gain access to the Salt masters that were running in customer environment. The hackers were able to bypass authentication, assume remote access, and get root admin access into the cloud accounts, essentially own the entire customer environment. So a lot of our secure state users were worried that what happens if our developers are running salt masters in their environment. So secure state gives them this easy search engine-like capability, essentially a cloud CMDB, through which the customers are able to ask questions about inventory that exists in your cloud environment. So in this case, users were able to ask, okay, show me all the EC2 instances which have the salt port open, essentially 4505 and 4506, and within seconds where they were able to find out which teams in their organization were running salt masters and were at risk, right? And simply by closing these ports quickly, they were able to buy themselves more time to actually patch these servers properly. So beyond just predefined checks and security practices that you want to make sure that you have available in your security solutions, you also need to think about how you can ask these questions and essentially inform your investigations. These were essentially the five key things I wanted to share with you. And I know I used Secure State as an illustration to share some of these helpful techniques for our customers. But if you're using different tools, even cloud native services, I would encourage you to think about how you can answer these questions through your uh, predefined or even custom solutions. These techniques are essentially helping our customers speed up detection, improve visibility, scale security, but ultimately enable their developers teams. So hopefully this was helpful to you. And if you have any questions, please shoot them now.